Your host, Christene Marie. I am excited to keep this live short. And tonight on the show, we're just going to talk about some reflections from 2025 because, man, heading into 2026, I feel excited for the year. I feel nervous for the year. The year holds a lot for me that I want to do. And as I head into the new year, I don't want to forget how 2025 was, who I was, what I was proud of, what frankly I wasn't, and how I want to grow into the new year. But before I can really look ahead, before I can set new metrics, new targets, before I can really identify anything that I want to change, I need to identify what happened and even remember who was I and how did I live, the who and the inner being in addition to what I did and how did I show up in terms of the external outer world. But so much of that is a reflection of our inner world. So as we head into the new year, I just want to take a few minutes. This isn't going to be a long show. Actually, my whole family is here and celebrating New Year's, but I wanted to jump on here because my family, over the last couple of days, we've celebrated Christmas this week. Normally, we would all celebrate Christmas on Christmas, but since three of my siblings, I'm one of six kids, and since three of my siblings are married with families, we decided to just make a rule that we will always celebrate Christmas the week of New Year's. So we celebrated Christmas earlier this week, and we are all still together. And every single meal time this week, we've all had a question that we'll go around and answer. And there's 10 of us, so it takes a while. But we've gone around and answered the question that's been posed. So we don't know what the question is before we all sit down to breakfast or dinner. But my dad asked a question the first day, and he said, "Tell us one thing about your partner, about your sibling that you love most that no one else in the family knows." And man, it led to such a meaningful discussion, and there were tears on multiple occasions. Even one of us were talking about how our relationship has been kind of restored in 2025. My niece, who is 11 years old, went around to every single person in the family. She doesn't have a partner or spouse, obviously, and her sibling is 2 years old, or I think he's like 1.5. So she instead chose to effectively honor every single one of us. So she went around and honored every single person, from my parents and grandparents to all of my siblings and I. And she was just 11 years old and just crying and crying and crying. And man, she was just sharing from her heart in a really, really beautiful way. And so that was question number one, posed on, I think, Monday, our Christmas day. And then question number two on Tuesday, my brother asked, he said, "What is one area this past year that you've grown spiritually or changed spiritually? And then how do you want that to look in 2026? And that was such a good reflection question, because it really forced us to go forward and think, okay, actually spiritually, because a lot of us think about intellectual pursuits. How am I growing by the way of books I'm reading, or in school, if we're in that age, or in terms of AI, how am I changing in that regard? Or even emotionally, it's been a trending thing to focus on emotional intelligence. How am I feeling? How am I doing? How am I emotionally? But spiritually is one that not a lot of us spend a lot of time attending to. And so this question that my brother posed of how have you changed spiritually? And then also, what do you want your spiritual life to look like for 2026? Again, we have to look backward before we can look forward and set new intentions. So his question of going back and looking at 2025 was so good. And each one of us answered. Again, it was such a meaningful conversation. And then the question today that my other brother posed, which I loved this one. He said, "Tell us," everyone had to go around and answer, "what is one friendship that you've made that started in 2025 that has made an impact on you?" And all of us shared such different stories. I shared about my time in Italy on the island of Ischia. I did a workaway. For those of you who have never heard of that, I hadn't either. And workaway.com, I think, is the website. And you literally go on and you find families around the world, or even individuals, but they've got a house or a property, and you effectively stay with them in exchange for you working around their house. And so I stayed at an Italian vineyard for a week, And there were multiple people from multiple countries, and it was the best experience. It was so amazing. And so I got to stay with a gal from Belgium, and I shared how my relationship with her and her friendship to me just for a week. We stayed in a little Airbnb together, and I learned a lot about myself through just a week meeting some random girl from Belgium. And so that was so cool to look back at in terms of, okay, we looked back the first day in terms of our immediate relationships with our partners or our siblings, and then we looked at spiritually, how did we change, and then we also looked, yes, relationally, but beyond that too, could even be strangers. And actually, a lot of us, the relationships that we shared weren't key staple people in our lives. They were people that we knew for a week, or maybe we saw once a week at church or whatever it is. My sister, it's her neighbor. And so it was so incredibly beautiful to see how we can be changed and how we get to impact other people's lives just by showing up and being consistent and living in alignment with our values. And so as I look back on 2025, I now, because of these questions that we talked about over the last couple of days, all of which honestly, I think they're wonderful questions if you want to take to your family over the next few days. Each one of these questions helped me identify how I want to live in 2026 even better. I actually really want to be able to answer that friend question in a meaningful way next year. I realized when he asked that, I don't invest in friendships as a high priority. And I invest in my family and I invest in work, but I haven't made friendships a big goal. And so looking ahead, that's something that I want to change. And I would love if any of you want to take those 3 questions that my family and I sat around and chatted about. It helped me really understand each one better too. You know, my sister and my brother, they all shared these friendships that made impacts on them that we would have never would have heard about. And their lives are literally changing as a result of these people. And so it just was really meaningful to take time on New Year's Eve and the days leading up to it to look back and really reflect and remember and really feel gratitude. It's been such a wonderful year, y'all. We live so richly. And it was really, really meaningful to do that. So just quickly, I wanted to jump over to the chat here. I know I'm live on a couple different platforms, but I just wanted to say hey to Richard. It's good to see you. I grew up in Maryland, so I'm from Maryland. Hunter, it's good to see you. Allie Hubrick, thank you for joining out there. I love that you said it's all God's purpose, everything. I completely agree. Lila, Happy New Year's to you. Sure thing. Thank you for joining. And James, it's good to see you. Y'all, we live such rich lives. We really, really do. And if we just move quickly into the new year, there's something that we can really leave behind. I sat down and actually went through pictures on my phone last week as I was looking at goal setting for 2026. And it was really helpful to just look back at pictures. There were some hard times in 2025, like we all have, and there were some good times in 2025, like we all have. And then we just get to choose, okay, who am I going to be in 2026? Am I going to focus on what's good and beautiful and lovely? Or am I going to fixate on what's hard or negative? And so when we choose the perspective that we want to move through the year with, it's like choosing the lens. When we're born into whatever family we're born into, we're given a preset lens by way of what our parents think and how they view the world. And a lot of us, we take that subconsciously into life thereafter. And so the opportunity for us to choose is here and now. And that's a really, really powerful thing. But we have to first, again, look back and identify what is the lens that was handed to me. And then we get to ask, okay, well, what do I want it to look like? What do I want the future me? How do I want me to exist? I'm going to be taking this weekend and doing a retreat. And I'm just really excited to take that time to really lean into what do I feel called to this year. Today I did a workshop where I attended it, where someone was teaching it, and it was absolutely brilliant. He said that the most important thing that we can do in 2026 is create containers of time And it's just a time block on the calendar. And the goal is that you not necessarily even achieve the same thing every time. You're not always being consistent with the actual activity within that container. But the goal is that you're honoring the time that you set aside, because we give out our time to everybody and we just dole it out, and we don't think about how much of time is actually our greatest asset, and it's the greatest commodity and most precious commodity that we have. And so if we're not affording time with intention to ourselves, there's no way that we're going to be able to hit the goals and dreams that we want. And so we don't need to be rigid about what we do in that time, but we need to actually put it on the calendar, and we need to actually schedule it out and really have boundaries that honor that time. So y'all, thank you so much for joining tonight. I know it's a short show. My whole family's here, and they're all outside, so I'm going to go be with them for a little bit. But man, let's look back before we move forward. Even tomorrow and this weekend, I know it will be 2026, and Happy New Year's for everyone who it is 2026 already. But before we really move into the year fully, January is just a really good time to adjust. And that's what I'm going to be doing, because there's a lot that I want to achieve, but I don't want to set goals that are unrealistic. And as I was taught this morning in the workshop, the goal for me now has changed, and it's let me just maintain commitment to the time that I'm setting aside. Let me honor that time every day or every week that I'm putting aside, rather than fixating on what I'm going to do during that time. Let me go ahead and just honor my own commitment to myself, because frankly, y'all, I will make my word to somebody else more important than my own word to myself. And if I really start keeping my own word, I wonder what I can accomplish. And so that's my goal for this upcoming year in terms of my word. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I've heard more and more people pick what's your word. And so my word for this year was predictable. Like, I just want to be so consistent that I'm predictable to myself, for my team, that they know that what I say is what's exactly going to happen. And what that means also is that I actually need to have a cover over my mouth and be careful with my yes and be careful with my no, so that I'm not committing to too much. I'm not overextending. I'm not overpromising and under-delivering. So with that, Nitrous, Happy New Year. It's good to see you. James, thank you for joining. Lender, Junior, good to see you too. Y'all, I hope you have just such a wonderful day tomorrow. I don't know how many of you are still with family or working, but we all have this power. Going back to the question that my family asked around the dinner table today, we all have the power to be that person in someone else's life, where we just by being ourselves, we actually have the ability to influence them and impact them in a very real way. We're all sitting around the dinner table, and I bet you that girl, she's 23 years old, I'm over a decade older than her, and she made a really big impact in me. She showed me a part about life that I actually want to change the way I exist in the world because of who she is. And I'll probably never see her ever again. We spent time for a week together on a random island in Italy, but because of who she is, she's forever impacted me. And y'all, every single one of us, whether we'll know it or not, has the ability to do that. And so there's a responsibility there. And also there's a lot of excitement in that too, that man, we play a part. There's a role for us. We're not just living for ourselves, but when we think about us in relation to the greater good, in relation to community, all of a sudden life gets so much bigger, and it just gets that much more beautiful and potent. So with that, happy New Year, friends. And I will see you tomorrow.